right, welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to learn how to do the actual code, right? So how to refer to resources and how to create the button logic when we press it. Okay, some of my favorite stuff coming up here. So really a couple things. One is we're going to have to figure out the things that we've made in layout. How are we going to refer to them in code, right? How do we know what the actual button is, right? How do we know what this text is so we can change it? So that's going to be one thing, is what's called capturing the views. Second thing is going to be, well, how do I actually listen for button presses, right? And between those two things, we're going to be pretty good. So let's go back here. You might be wondering why I haven't run the program yet. And honestly, there's nothing really to see. If we were to run it, we would get a non-functional program that looks exactly like it does here on the, sort of in our preview here, so there's no sense in doing it yet. All right, so jumping over up to MainActivity. So let's talk a little bit about what we have here. So MainActivity, activities are essentially screens in Android, and every activity that we make is going to extend some other one, right? So the parent class for this guy is what's called an app compat activity, and this is, again, so it works not just with some of the newer versions, but also older versions of the code base. And I've really had good luck with it so far, so good stuff. And we see that that's imported for us. We said that's part of a support library for backwards compatibility. We already know that it's this activity that's launched when we start the program because we saw that in the manifest. But which method is launched? Well, there's a whole series of methods that are launched. It all has to do with what's called the life cycle of the activity. But all we care about right now, in the most basic sense, is this onCreate, right? And onCreate is, if you want to think about that as being kind of like your main method in Java. It's given some information sometimes, like if it's being restored from rotating the screen or something like that. But right now that's going to be null. We're just going to ignore it. We're going to make the super call. In fact, we're never going to really touch these first couple lines of code because the first one says go ahead and instantiate this app compat activity, and the second one is telling us to set the view in this activity to be this layout file that we've been working on. So that's great. Those stay as is. All right. So the next couple things that we want to do are going to be to capture our different views. So the first, the way that we do that, and really what you need to know here, is that any activity has a findViewById method, right, where you give it a resource ID. So I don't usually type this on this, but findViewById. R stands for resources, and it actually it compiles our resources into this Java file that we could look at. I'm not going to do that right now, but we have R dot. Oops, moved my font here. R dot ID dot, and then anything that you've given an ID in your layouts, right? So we see that there's two here. So let's go ahead and grab the message text first, and I know that message text was a widget that was called a text view. And again, if I forgot that, I could go back here and I could see that that's indeed the case. All right. So close out some other things while I'm at it here. Back in. All right. So that's a text view. So I want to store this guy as a text view. So text view, and I can really call it what I want. I might call it message text view. Sometimes I call them TV for short. If you want, and you'll see that it's actually going to be complaining a little bit because findViewById. Let's see if we can get this error to come up here. It says that it's required to give a text view to assign it there, but it only returned a view. No surprise, right? So I give it an ID and it returns me a view. I know that it's a text view, so I'm going to go ahead and typecast this. Very common pattern to do in Android, so no worries about doing that. Okay. So that's my message text view. It's grayed out because I haven't used it yet. Just ignore it. No big deal for now. We want to do the same thing for our button. All right, so I can call this button what I want. This one, since it just is going to increment things, I'm going to call it an increment button. Cast to a button, call findViewById, r.id.button, since it was the only one there. I could have used it as an ID. I could have used the increment button if I wanted to be consistent. Not a problem in a small program. All right, and so I've captured my widgets. All right, so and that's all that's going on here. Any references to views, you're gonna capture using findViewById. Easy thing to do. All right, next thing is going to be to go ahead and check the listeners. So we're going to set an OnClickListener, and we'll just go in and do it and then talk about it afterwards. All right, so this increment button, dot, I can do set OnClickListener, and you've probably done similar things if you've used Swing with Java, where you're listening for clicks there. I guess action listeners. Now there's a couple ways of doing this, right? So remember, if we set an OnClickListener on an increment button, it's going to be listening to that particular button. But then the parameter is who responds. And just like in Swing, there's lots of different options that you could have. I will generally make, I'll either have anonymous listeners, which I'm going to do right now, or I'll have the activity itself respond. And I'll do anonymous listeners on this one, and then in the next app we'll have the activity respond, just so you can see both. So this one right here, it's going to be a new OnClickListener, and you see how just how smart the tool is here, that it does all the imports for us, it fully qualifies us, and it even gives us the method that we need to override. So they're really, really nice. So what do we want to have happen when it clicks? Well, we want to increment the number of clicks, so I guess we should be storing that. So I'm going to need a field for that. I could make it local, but not a bad idea to have a field up here. So I'll make a private. It's going to be an int. I could call this numClicks. Generally in Android, when you have fields, you're going to prefix them with the letter M for my, showing that it's an instance variable. If it was static, we could use an S. But that's a pretty consistent naming that people use. I can initialize it to 0 up here. So when I click, I want to go ahead and I want to increment that. So let's go ahead and add 1 to it, just like so. And I want to update the text. So let's go ahead with the text here. So I have this message text view, and you'll notice even as I type that in here, it knew that I was going to be referring to it, and it automatically made it final. That's something about Java, that if you have an inner class, it needs to be final in the outer class for it to recognize it. So it's kind of neat that it does that. And I'm going to want to set the text, and I'm just going to use the basic version where I'm going to be passing in a string. This is going to get a bit long, so I'm going to actually put this on another line here. So I'm going to call that S and declare the string S here. So what's that going to look like? Well, it's this plurals that I have to put in, and I need to get those plurals from somewhere. All right, so I could try to type in get plurals, but Activity doesn't have that. I have to go one step further, and I have to say, hey, resources. So this is the Activities get resources method. It will let me get plurals, and actually I can get a quantity string. All right, that's what they're called here. Quantity strings come in a couple different formats. So one is just the ID of it, and then how many you have, so it knows which of those items to pick. Do you want the one or do you want the other? And then if it's formatted, then you're going to have to pass it in your format arguments. So we actually want this. It turns out this second one right here. So we call this guy r.plurals dot and the message format. One, how many do I have? Well, I have my numClicks, numClicks, and that's to choose the plurals. And then the next one is to plug in for the %d in the integer. And I know that seems a little bit weird to use both, but that's what we got to do. And I'm at a point where I could run my program. So I am going to run it. There's lots of different ways to run it. You see that there's a shortcut here to run it, Alt-Shift-X. And I think you need to do that the first time, or hit the run buttons. One of these guys. After that, I think Control-11 will work, but it's only for rerunning. And again, that's for those that are familiar with Eclipse. And I'll ask you, I have an emulator running, so I have this guy. If I want to use the same one for all my future launches, I can do that. So I'll click OK, give it some time to come up. Okay, so it launched here. Let's check to see what we got here. So when I click Press Me, it went from 0 times to 1 time. Looks pretty good so far. I'm encouraged. Click it again, and we get 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, and nothing much else exciting happening after that. Right, because obviously the plurals aren't changing after that. Let's make something exciting happen. What I want to do is when I click it 10 times, I want this text to disappear. A couple different ways of doing that. We'll actually talk about the easiest way in a minute, but I want an excuse to talk a little bit more about referring to colors from this here. So what I want to do is change the text color to be that background color, so it looks like it goes invisible. So I'll play around with this. So if my number of clicks ever goes above 10 clicks, all right, then I wanna do this thing. So let's see. I'm gonna have to get. Yeah, there's something up with colors. You have to get them. There's something with the compatibility library. So I'm gonna do this. It's context. Oops. Context compat is a class that has a static method in it to get the color, and you see that you have to pass in a context and then an ID. Well, this is our first of many times in this class looking at what a context is. The activity is the most used context, so I need to refer to this activity here. Now you might be thinking that this is the activity, but again, remember I'm inside an anonymous class, so I have to do the Java trick of giving the name of the outer class dot this. So that's my context, and then I need the ID of the color. So this is r.color dot, and I want to change that to the background color, like so. That's going to return a color, so I can set this to a variable, and the type on this guy, it's actually colors are just ints. And then I can set the color. So I want, it's my message text view dot set, and if you're wondering, is it set color or text color? Well, if you do color, there's it actually is smart enough where there's no color, but there is. It actually can find it even though we didn't get it in the right order, and it takes an int here. So let's give it that background color that we just typed in. All right. Let's see. Just kind of cleaning up my code a little bit here. I can hit format if I want, and rerun it again. Alt-Shift-X, and let it run. All right, we're launched. So let's see how it did here. So 0 times, 1 time, 2 times, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, more than 10. Text is now the same as the background color. It disappears. All right, so works just fine. Let's just do some quick wrap up here and some review. So the first thing is, and I know it's kind of grayed out, so maybe it's not that easy to see, but really the easiest way to set that guy to be invisible would just be to take the message text view, and there's a set visibility method that you can call, and just pass in a constant text view dot invisible. All right, so just so you know, there's more than one way to do this. All right, one more thing is, as a matter of review, notice that in it that we did a lot of work here. In addition to setting our OnClickListener, we had to know how to get things from resources, and really it's kind of a bummer, but there's different ways to do it depending on what resource that you're grabbing. So for grabbing widgets from the layout, we used find view by ID, and then we had to typecast it. If we want to get strings, so we did a quantity string that we did there, but there's also a basic get string that you can use. That's pretty simple to use. And then finally, if we want to get colors, then we call this context compatibility class, and we call get color on it. We pass in the context and then which color we're looking for. All right. So pretty decent. I should also mention that if you're just using a string directly from the resources, that set text is also overloaded to take an integer. So you can do that. Very, very handy. Also sometimes a source of bugs on people's part. If you wanted to print just a single integer, like if we wanted to print our number of clicks here directly, if we passed in an int, it would be looking for a resource ID with the value of our int, and it probably wouldn't find one, and it would give us some sort of an error. So just be aware of that. You'll probably hit that in your programming, and it's no big deal. All right, so that's all we got for you for this lesson. See you later.